So then I think of AI as a team member and I think, okay, if I look at the humans that I have in the room, which ways of thinking, which knowledge do I not have represented in my humans? I want my AI to be able to fill that gap. It's not just that AI is going to come in and solve all our team problems for us. I need to understand what's going on with the thinking of my team in order to use AI as a better team member. When you say we're going to teach you how to work on a team, it doesn't dig in very deep. It really doesn't. It doesn't dig very deep into how people think. And that's a mistake, in my opinion. I think that people actually enjoy learning about how they think. That's been my experience over 34 years of teaching students at Penn State. People are intrigued by that. We don't put it into the mix enough. We don't want to invalidate if there's somebody who's very, very concerned about what AI is going to do. That's their prerogative. But I think that you're touching on that, the sense of for some people, the thought of AI becoming too much like a human makes them very, very uncomfortable, whereas others are actually seeking it. They would like that. They would actually like AI to be their companion or whatever. I don't think as society I don't think that conversation is over.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edgy Futurist podcast. It is a pleasure to have you with us as always on this wonderful, sunny. Ben got nervous because he thought we were going to have it. It's not even sunny, but I wanted to surprise you and tell everybody it was because you don't know when we're doing it. But we have another wonderful guest with us today who is going to introduce themselves as we always do. Ben's laughing, and so is Kathryn, because we had a discussion about why. Well, that's absolutely fine as well. But Ben, how are you doing, man? You all right?
I am very well, very well. We've had some lovely road shows. We've got some more coming up. Yeah, it's been great. Doing some cool stuff and excited for what's coming, and very much excited to have a conversation with the guest that we've got in the studio today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to kind of explore AI and the conversation we'll have, Kathryn, but we'll get you to introduce yourself in a second, but also that conversation around how it is around growth of team, but how AI can be that team member and that an addition rather than a replacement of human. So I believe that's where a lot of the conversation will go. But you know us, guests, and you know us as listeners. Hopefully you do, Kathryn. We go in a rabbit hole. Get ready, Alice. We're going to dive into some, and let's meet the rabbit for a cup of tea. But Kathryn, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit of your background and your current role.
Sure, absolutely. So, hi, I'm Kathryn Jablokow, and there's a quiz on my last name at the end. So everybody write that down. I'm currently the Dean of Engineering at Manhattan University, which is just a little bit north of the tip of Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan. I'm an electrical engineer by education. That was a very long time ago that I got my PhD. I'm not going to date myself, but I spent 34 years teaching at Penn State University after I got my degree in mechanical engineering. Then I spent 5 years in the federal government at the National Science Foundation. And now I'm back in education at Manhattan University. So super pleased to be here, excited to see where this conversation goes. Rabbit holes are fine. So.
Love it. We always like it when guests say they're okay with rabbit holes. We have had in the past people that are very much scripted and they only ever want it to stay on a talk track. So we're always grateful because us two northern British blokes, I've got diverse brains and we end up going on rabbit holes. So we're grateful that you do that. And so before we kind of dig into the thoughts that you've got and the work that you've been doing, research and the support you've been in that space, I wonder if you could kind of talk us through that journey. Obviously, you said that you'd got your qualifications, then you'd worked in university, then gone into the government, and then back into university. What made you go that trajectory from an education leadership perspective?
So great question. So I started. I think it's first good to understand. I was born into a family of educators. So my father was a professor of electrical engineering for 52 years. My mother was a German teacher for 20 years. And so going into education, going into academia as a profession felt pretty natural to me, as opposed to industry, right? Because you come out as an engineer and you tend to go, you got three choices really. It's industry for most people or academia or government. And I knew I wanted to be a professor because I really loved what professors did. And the fact that it was all about learning and it was all about constantly thinking about how could we take ideas and how could we communicate those ideas and how we could learn from other people. So when I went to work at Penn State, I was, pretty much the standard professor. I did lots of research, lots of teaching of young people, but I also felt a need to kind of expand into leadership positions where I was also helping to lead the direction of the institution, not just be delivering the education myself. And so I started to go into academic administration at Penn State for a few years. And then I discovered this opportunity that the federal government has in the US, and particularly the National Science Foundation, where they basically borrow faculty member. So it's called a rotating position. And the NSF pays your salary to the university, but you get assigned to Washington, D.C. And what this does is it's beneficial on both sides. So as a faculty member, you are now in the world of research funding. And so you are actually taking proposals from other faculty members like yourself, and you're deciding where the taxpayer dollars go and which research is the best. So you learn how to do that from the inside, which means you can go back to your institution and you can be more successful. But the National Science Foundation also gains because you're this expert. You can only be there for 4 years at a time. You come in, you've got these new ideas, and they learn more about where research is supposed to go. And so I did that for 4 years and absolutely loved it. It was a phenomenal opportunity. And so much so that I thought, it's time for me to retire from academia. I'm going to go and work for the federal government full time. And so in 2024, that's what I did. I actually retired from Penn State and I said, I'm going to be a full time federal civil servant. And that was a fascinating learning experience in and of itself. It's a whole different world to work for the government than academia. But I had kind of been in the soup for a while. And then 2025 happened, and it became less comfortable to work in the federal government, to work in Washington. And there was, a lot of turmoil in the federal funding space, and there still is. And so I said, I think I'm going to go back to my academic roots, wait until the federal government sorts itself out. Let's wait until a time when research for engineering and science is more welcomed and more supported. And I found this opportunity to have a real leadership role at Manhattan University. And so they are in a position now where they really want the School of Engineering to grow and to basically be transformed. And that's the kind of assignment I like. So I like coming into a space and they say, okay, you don't have to blow it up, but can you boost us up a big step? And so that excites me, that kind of work. And that's what Manhattan University wants me to do. And so I've only been here for 9 months, and it's a whirlwind. It's a waterfall, but I love it. That's what I love to do. So, and this kind of opportunity to talk to you is part of that, finding out what other people think and finding out and getting the word out for some of the things that we're thinking about in Manhattan. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and what does that work look like on a day-to-day basis? Clearly, you've not blown up the bridge, but you're
No.
looking at the bridge. I'm guessing you're concentrating on the bridge itself, and do you need to rebuild? Do you need to, and rather than the bridge builders, it's ultimately the process and the things that have been put in place rather than the individuals within it. What has that in the months that you've worked, or a quarter of the year leading up to a year? What does that look like, and where have you seen the biggest impact, either technology, automation, or from some of the human approaches to one, the team, but also the impact on learning?
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, one of the things that I have to do, and I think anytime you come into an organization, an educational institution, is identifying which of the core pieces, I don't want to call them traditional, but which of the current core pieces do you want to keep? You need to keep them. They're absolutely essential. So, for example, in a school of engineering, you want to keep your core degrees. You want to keep your mechanical engineering, your electrical engineering, your civil engineering. Those are core. Everybody's looking for those, and you don't want to blow them up, right? Because they're central to that. But at the same time, they can be refreshed. So one of the things that we're looking at is how can the core degrees that we have be updated? New things have happened in education, new ways of teaching, new topics that might be appropriate. And we're going to talk about AI, I know, in a moment, but of course, that's one of them. How do we take the core degrees that we have and how do we take things like AI and integrate that in a way that makes sense. And then you also have to look at how we need to grow. So we need to demonstrate as an institution that our School of Engineering is responding to the market. We're responding to the needs of industry. We're responding to what students want and what their families want their young people to learn. And so there's some invention at the same time you're refreshing what you already have. And so working with the faculty to figure out how to do that, because I mean, my background is electrical. I don't know civil engineering. So I have to rely on my faculty. And so how it impacts learning is we want to engage the students in this process as well. What is working for them? What is helping them to get jobs? What is not helping them to get jobs? Because of course that is the number one concern when our families come in, and prospective families. They want to know if their kids are going to have a job when they graduate. And of course, in engineering, you are more likely to have a job. I mean, that's just the truth of it. But we still have to demonstrate that the degrees we're producing are degrees that industry wants. So I would say there's a lot of give and take right now. Talking to our industry advisors is something that I'm also very, very engaged in. We're very fortunate sitting next to New York City that this university has always been really, really integrated with the city. So if you look at the major building projects in New York, a Manhattan engineer is on that project or was on that project, at least one. Have you ever heard of the Tappan Zee Bridge? Do you know the Tappan Zee Bridge? Okay, so the Tappan Zee Bridge is this beautiful bridge structure that's north of Manhattan, takes you over to New Jersey. And that bridge, it's also called the Governor Mary M. Cuomo Bridge, but nobody calls it that anymore for obvious reasons. Manhattan University had more engineers working on that bridge than any other university. So you get connected, right, to industry, and that impacts how education flows because we have our advisors coming in. We have them constantly telling us, here's what we need to see in our students. So as a dean, it's sort of the level at which I'm working, but at the same time, culture within the university, within the school, within the faculty is something that you always have to look at too. What is that culture of teaching and learning? And here at Manhattan, it's a small school. So our classes are, 20, 25 at the most. And so it's very high touch between the faculty member and the students. And it's one of the things that we rely on as a unique feature of the university. And so that, the way we teach compared to the way that I taught when I was at Penn State, the equations are the same, of course, but the interaction in class is different. It's different when I have 25 students and 120 in the room. We don't have 120 here at Manhattan. We only have the 2025. So I don't know. Are we going down a rabbit hole? Am I rabbit holing for you?
Yeah, no, and I think that's it's super cool thinking about what has changed in the tenure that you've had from starting and where it sits now in terms of we're doing huge volume of numbers, and in lots of organizations they're going to scale because they have to go to scale, but then this micro really drilling down into making sure we know the students are the right students on the right course for the right role. And interestingly, that's possibly tied to the broader conversation that you were mentioning there, making sure that our graduates and postgraduates have got something to go into, especially in the we're going to get into AI for sure in that scarcity model, and if there is a scarcity or not, or whether that's just engineered, no pun intended, to make us feel like it is the case. But that reality of going, okay, we've got fewer students to make sure that they are the right students on the right course, and there are then potential jobs for them, and actually something that gives them that purpose. I'm really interested to hear your the way that you've gone into this in terms of the research around where AI fits into that. You can imagine that on this podcast where we're talking about future of education, AI has been on the tips of tongues for a number of years. In fact, we like to be quite proud of the fact we were talking about this before ChatGPT, as if we're like some kind of OGs. But obviously, in the last few years, it has been exacerbated, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry's got an opinion about AI and what it sits with. You're at the cutting edge of it as an engineer, and you'll probably see this in a different way than other people will see it as well. But could you just tell us a little bit about that latest research, and then we'll kind of pick up about what we think that might mean for education going forward?
Sure. So one of the things I think that we all find annoying about AI is that it's actually not very good at finding exactly what you want. It's good at finding something, but it's not good at finding what you want. So for example, I can, I put something into ChatGPT and I say, give me an outline for, a presentation on XYZ topic. And it's like, sure. And of course, it's always very happy and treats you like you're brilliant. And it gives you that outline, but it can't help me find the right lamp for my living room. Right. It struggles with things that have nuance. It struggles with things that may not be just, cut and dry in terms of information. And so this kind of thing got me and some of my colleagues thinking about how do we take AI and make it more have some of the configurations or some of the qualities of a human without necessarily saying we're doing this to take over human activity, right? And so I work with some folks at Carnegie Mellon, a professor there named Chris McComb. He's actually the AI coder guru, and I'm more of the cognitive diversity person on these projects. But what we said was, can we take any kind of, I'll call it a personality dimension, and can we integrate that into AI at all? Is it even possible, right? Or is it always just going to be kind of you get what you get? Because if you think about it, when you get answers from AI, it people say, well, it doesn't really have a personality. It has this mishmash of a personality is what it has, right? You can't really tell what its personality is. So can we improve on that? And so we started really, really small, actually, with just agents, with individual AI agents. And we said, these little teeny tiny pieces of code, right? Basically, and we said, can we teach these teeny tiny pieces of code to do something that mimics a particular type of thought? And so then the question was, well, which thought dimension, which thinking dimension do we want to focus on? Because there's so many dimensions to personality, and you could pick anywhere. And for the last 25 years, since, well, was it longer than that? 1995. I can't do my math. I've been working in the cognitive diversity space in engineering design, and actually teamed up with a British cognitive psychologist. His name was Michael Curtin. He just passed away a couple years ago. And I teamed up with him because the way that he looked at cognition was really rigorous. And so as an engineer, I could look at the way he was assessing cognitive diversity, and I could say it's not something somebody dreamt up in a bathtub. This is something that I can really hang my hat on as an engineer. And so one of the things that his theory is called Adaption-Innovation Theory. So it's actually also AI. It just has a hyphen. So it gets a little confusing in papers sometimes. But basically, you're looking at a person's preference for structure in their thinking. And so it is a continuum. And again, this is all, you can measure it, you can validate, et cetera. And so you've got people who prefer lots and lots and lots of structure. Their brains do. It's not something they decided. It's something that they're born with. They like a lot of detail. They're more comfortable if things are nailed down. They're more comfortable if schedules are tight. They're more comfortable if the team that you're on is all kind of moving along together, right? And then as you move along the spectrum, that preference for structure gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So you get towards the middle, let's say, and you have people who still, you can tell that they would like some guidelines, they would like some rules, but they're not quite as much of a stickler as the person over here. And they're a little more willing for the team to kind of flex. And then you keep moving and moving towards the other direction, and you get down towards this end. And now you've got people who shed structure. They actively shed structure. You give them rules, they're going to break them on purpose. You tell them how the team works, the norms, they're going to do something else. And in humans, it's a beautiful bell curve. So we're thinking, okay, can we take that one quality and can we integrate that into artificial intelligence? And so the first studies were taking these teeny tiny AI agents and saying, okay, when you get to a decision point, little agent, take the most structured, deterministic, risk averse answer. And so we had one set, they did that. And whatever choices they got, that's what they did. And then the others did the opposite, like take the most risk, the riskiest, the least certain. And what we wondered was if we gave them tasks, these are computational, will they wind up at solutions that we would expect humans with? A more adaptive is the more structured, more innovative is the least structured. Would they end up with those results? And they did. And these are really simple, basic mathematical tasks, but we proved that we could get it to work at the micro level of artificial intelligence. So that was the first thing we did. But then we said, but what about the general user of artificial intelligence? What could we do there? And so we said, well, you look at AI, you look at ChatGPT, you look at Claude, it only knows what you give it, right? It knows the information it has access to, and it's going to make all its decisions based upon that. So what if we taught it about this adaption innovation spectrum? What if we made it kind of an expert on that specifically? So we did. We took the platform and we said, here's a whole bunch of information about adaption innovation. And then we said, now we're going to ask you questions, AI, and we're going to ask you to mimic different positions on the spectrum. And we basically made it really a gross distinction, just more adaptive versus more innovative. And we gave it design problems because we wanted to focus on engineering. We said, okay, here's a design problem for, say, designing a way that when you walk away from your stuff in a coffee shop, it stays secure while you walk across the street and come back. And we said, give us, pretend you're more adaptive, more innovative. And we then looked at the design solutions and we found that it could do it. So it gave us more certain structured solutions versus riskier solutions. And so the point is it's one dimension. It didn't cover the whole continuum of cognitive style, but it demonstrated that we can do better with our AI platforms. We don't, at the moment, the people who are coding them, the most they're really thinking about is make sure it has a positive tone. Make sure that it tells you that your ideas are useful or whatever. But we can do better than that. And so that's where we are with the research, and really want to encourage the community who are producing these platforms to be thinking more, because I imagine now I'm a student and I want to use AI. How much better will it be if that platform has something more of the human aspect to it? So I'll leave it there for a minute.
And through that engagement with community to builders, it's called builders in terms of those the large language models, the providers, or unique individual wrappers, or whatever you want to. Is there an appetite for that, or actually are they still appealing to the mass market? Because there's that conflict in terms of their models potentially are trying to suit all. The narrowing of a focus into education when you're a profit-making business,
Yeah.
potentially, let's be honest, they'll say, oh yeah, we've got an education version of everything else. I get it, I worked in that set, but really profitability of the product is not a byproduct of the product being strong. What they're
Yeah.
saying is ultimately, if it works in education, that's great, but they're led by profit. So
Yeah.
how are you seeing that shift in terms of their engagement from the other side?
I don't think they've noticed yet. Honestly, I don't think they've noticed us yet. I don't think they're thinking about it. I think you're right. I think that they are, as a business, they want to make the most money, the most profit they can, and if they can do that in a one size fits all, then they will. But I'm hoping that it's going to be with AI the same way it has been with other technologies, right? That maybe the boutique companies, if they pay attention and say, well, okay, ChatGPT is this, Claude is this, but what we're going to produce is an AI platform that has personality, or that thinks in more human ways. I don't know. I think we're still in this, we're still in the Wild West with AI. We really are. It's still everybody trying lots of different stuff to see what sticks. And I don't know that people have caught on to this yet because it's still in the research world, right? Getting people to pay attention when you're a professor, it's like, yeah, right, fine. Go back to your lab.
And it's interesting, I think, ultimately, when we see a product that is built for education that goes mass market that way around, and especially in AI, if you think about technology, Microsoft have done a wonderful marketing tool of demonstrating how their tool is built for education, ultimately was built for business, built on premise, and then has gone cloud and
Yeah.
gone like Teams as an example.
Yeah.
Look how amazing it is as a virtual learning environment and for teaching and learning. We're ultimately what? It's a business product.
Yeah.
The tool that I love the most, and I was talking about earlier actually, is Google Classroom, a tool that was built for education and actually has transcended into the business and into the world. I'm hoping that there will be some form of AI or an iteration or something that starts in education and transcends. I would love that, because that then is built for education. Like the useful, necessary for some, useful for all in terms of accessibility.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was useful or necessary for education, but useful for the rest of us. That is where I'd love to see AI, something that's tailored to the rest, but built for education. And do you see
Agreed.
any? Is there any, in terms of your research? Are you trying them all and then seeing what sticks, or is it as a niche down to? Are you? I don't want to name drop, but Claude and Gemini and OpenAI and all. Is it something that you're seeing that's more easy to, or is the research just focused on the whole of AI?
Yeah, I think we're more focused at that general level is if we can get this to work at a really fundamental level, it ought to work across the platforms rather than focusing on any particular platform. And that is, I credit my colleague at CMU because that's his focus. It's very general. He's in the computer science department. And he's looking at what will work across, what principles would work across different platforms. So far, that's how we've approached it.
So, in terms of how this then becomes this, how do we train this? How do we develop AI so that you develop it in an ethical way in terms of, so we know when we need to make sure we do that. But my kind of thought is how does this training to become this additive team member like that we're talking about? How does that then, because we're saying that AI can become part of the team as opposed to a replacement of, and it enhances the work. We've heard lots of conversations over the last few years where AI is going to replace, and actually we're talking about the integration perhaps and the enhancement that sits into there. How does that work? And I know that's probably two questions, but how does that training and then how does it do that enhancement piece?
So when people talk about AI as a team member, I always think about when we put a human team together. It's like, why do we bring certain people to the team? Because for whatever reasons we use to determine which human is on the team, we should be using at least part of that thinking when we say, what do we want the AI to be? Or we have to decide AI is never going to be a team member. It's always going to be a tool. Right? Or we decide that sometimes it's going to be a tool and sometimes it's going to be a team member. And I think we need to be really deliberate, because if we're only thinking about it as a tool, right, then it's always going to be my way of thinking and using it to assist me in my way of thinking, right? If I'm using it as a team member, then I think more of, okay, I bring you two onto my team because you know things I don't. Otherwise, we don't need a team. Otherwise, we don't need each other, right? I bring you onto the team because you think in different ways than I do. And I'm doing that because the problem that we're solving needs that diversity of thinking. So then I think of AI as a team member and I think, okay, if I look at the humans that I have in the room, which ways of thinking, which knowledge do I not have represented in my humans? I want my AI to be able to fill that gap. And so if I think about it that way, so let's take that spectrum of style structure and style preference, right? What if our team is really loaded towards one end of the spectrum or really loaded towards the other end? Now I would want to say, well, the best way to have a balanced team would be for me to have an AI that is focused on moving or providing that other perspective, that other way of thinking. And so your AI probably needs to do it all. It needs to be able to mimic, let's say, that whole spectrum, if that's what we're talking about. But I, as the user, need to understand my team so that I understand what I want it for. And so using AI as team members, it presumes that I'm also more aware of teams in general. And that's something that we don't always think about. It's like, well, it's not just that AI is going to come in and solve all our team problems for us. I need to understand what's going on with the thinking of my team in order to use AI as a better team member. And so it's a bigger question than just the AI, I'm going to plunk it into my team. It's, do I understand, do I know what my team is doing, what my team can and can't do well? And so that knowledge is something that I think our students, sometimes I don't know what happens in other institutions, but how much are we teaching our students about what it means to be a team member in the first place, cognitively, so that when they have AI as another team member, they understand why it's there, what it's there to do, relative to what everybody in the team is meant to do. And I think that's something at least at Penn State where I was, and I'm starting to integrate it into Manhattan, is a lot of engineering students, when you say, we're going to teach you how to work on a team, it doesn't dig in very deep. It really doesn't. It doesn't dig very deep into how people think. And that's a mistake, in my opinion. I think that people actually enjoy learning about how they think. That's been my experience over 34 years of teaching students at Penn State. People are intrigued by that. But we don't put it into the mix enough. So, it's a bigger task than just thinking about the AI as a team member.
Yeah, I think, do we do a great job of getting people to work as team members while they sit in an exam on their own to do, and if they don't know the answer, they sit there for an hour and hope the answer comes to them. Especially, if you think about the endpoint assessment at GCSE or some of those, like, literally that is not real world. Why would you
Right.
need to be a team member if you're told, no, you work out in isolation, and if you have a conversation with somebody or look at something else, that's cheating. Like, literally, how does that create team members when everything is done in isolation? It's literally, think about the world and then do the complete exact opposite generally, especially in England. That is where our exam system is. So I would say, as an employer, lacking. My question number 4 is, in terms of this, is the intention or the hope to build one AI that will have multiple personalities and respond to the team member, or is it to build multiple people or multiple AI agents and multiple that ultimately is, you're not building one team member, you're building a team members of AI, because ultimately if I have a personality and I come in with one thing, will the AI respond to me differently to you and all those things? Or actually, is it case of, no, you'll always engage with 4 different personalities, some will push, some will probe. So ultimately, are they seeing the reverse and the mirror of us, that we sit in the conversation and the AI will always respond to the person? Or is it 3 people that will have diverse opinion and have conversation based? Because that's very different, isn't it? An
Yeah.
AI that does it all in terms of split personalities, I bet some of those humans as well,
Yeah.
depending on the day and the time of day and everything else. But ultimately, are we hoping for split personality AI? Are we hoping for various AI members that consult depending on the problem you're trying to solve?
Wow, that's a great question. I wonder what people would be psychologically more comfortable with, right? Would they prefer to work with one AI that has split personalities, or would they prefer, because I think that's, again, we go back to business and who's going to be creating these platforms. What will people want? What will they be more comfortable with? Because that's what they're going to buy. I
I think
don't.
the
Yeah.
challenge
No.
with creating one is,
Yeah.
if you say to that AI agent, always rebellious and always ask and disagree, the problem is they're always built to disagree with something that ultimately yesterday they agreed with. So
Yeah.
if they're constantly fighting, you're never going to get a solution, because ultimately it's always going to disagree with what it's put in front of it. Where if you build loads, then say, this is on the cusp of this, you are more risk averse, you are
Yeah.
more risky. If you build it that way, ultimately you're going to get aversion, rather than, it's like going, it's like having the worst manager in the world. I don't know what person I'm going to get each day. I'm sure they asked me to do this task, and now they're saying they're disappointed in it. They're not challenging it. It creates diversion, because ultimately the rebel will always rebel, regardless of whether yesterday they agreed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see your point, and I think it would feel more natural if they were separate. It would feel more natural, right? Because it would feel like I'm going to go to this AI because I want to have really detailed, really structured answers about something, and I'm going to go to this one because I want something that's a little more flexible, and I'm going to go to this one because they are, they're always challenging things, and that's what I want. And so it might feel more natural to us because that's what we do with people, right? When I'm looking for certain kind of ideas, I know who in my team or who in my organization tends to be the rebel versus the not. So I don't think they've gotten that far. I don't think anybody's gotten this far. Maybe it's my next life. Maybe it's my next
But
job.
what I'm also curious is that my unconscious bias as a human to then go, oh, well, my opinion is I'd like it that way because that's where I treat humans. And I was like, we don't want these artificial beings to be human. That's the benefit of them, that ultimately they shouldn't be. And it's just my human. Yeah, Ben calls me out constantly on the ability to say human. I don't call. So, Kathryn, just to call it out, Ben will challenge my ticks. I'm sure you notice Ben has million, but do not challenge Ben on his ticks.
No. It's just about being able to say the word human.
So
is what I
Ben
say.
will get upset if you challenge Ben. Definitely doesn't positively respond to it.
Well,
But as a thought, is it just in my head of, well, that's what I prefer because that's the way that I like to work? But is that my preference? Is that actually correct? Or am I trying to pigeonhole the wonderful nature of what AI can do? And ultimately, humans should be human should be used in terms of their intelligence, and artificial intelligence should be used for what it's good at. Am I trying to scaffold it and structure it too much?
well, I think you're touching on some of the fears, right? That some people take to great extent. I'm there, and I'm not making fun of anyone. Okay, I don't want to invalidate if there's somebody who's very, very concerned about what AI is going to do. That's their prerogative. But I think that you're touching on that, the sense of for some people, the thought of AI becoming too much like a human makes them very, very uncomfortable, whereas others are actually seeking it. They would like that. They would actually like AI to be their companion or whatever. I don't think a society I don't think that conversation is over. I think that conversation is far from over about how human we want our AI to be. And it's funny because in the robotics world, we've seen a smaller parallel of this, right? So, back in the 80s when robotics was big, and that was my research. My graduate research was robotics. We were actually building walking machines that looked like they came out of Star Wars. And in that time, everyone was afraid robotics is going to take over the world, right? Nobody's going to be doing hands-on jobs anymore because the robots are going to come take over the world. And it was very concerning to people. In the end, that didn't happen. But what we did see was this branch of robotics where it's robots that are made to look a lot like humans. And, you've got Boston Dynamics where they're jumping and they're leaping and everybody laughs and they dance. And, it's extremely difficult engineering to do that. It's not easy at all. And some people love that and would say, oh, that would be great. Can I have one in my house? And other people say, no way. I do not want one of those. I don't want one of those things in my house. It creeps me out. Don't do it. And so I think this is kind of a similar thing with AI. It's just that it's not a physical thing yet. And I don't think that conversation is over. But what you've seen with the humanoid robots, culture is an issue too, not an issue, but a differentiator. Our son has lived in China for a number of years, and you're going to see far more semi-humanoid little robots doing things than you do, say, in the US. And they're that culture kind of has welcomed that and it's become part of their culture. Whereas here, it's like it's fine for it to look like a machine that's carrying my food, but don't make it come to my door and knock on the door and talk to me. And so it's really interesting. So I don't think that conversation is over. I think we're just starting.
I would agree. And I think the more broader fears around there's the is it human, is it not human, is it individual, is it not individual, is it personal, do I have my own little control over that, where do I choose? They're real fears. But then some of the other fears that we've almost touched on, and I know that you'll have a few, I imagine, but I'm really conscious that there's some broader fears around displacement and
Yeah.
fear around data and fears
Yeah.
around environmentalism and elements that sit in there. I wonder if you could talk at that to supporters and to what's either come out in the research or what do you consider to be things that we need to think in that space?
So was that 3 questions, 5 questions? There were a lot of questions
That's
in
just
there.
what Ben does. I do this all the time. I
Okay. Okay.
apologize.
So there's data, right? Which is AI or not. I mean, I think the concerns are very real about control over your own data and making sure, of privacy. And as I said, it's not just related to AI. It's just I think AI accelerates that because of the amount of data that your AI engines want to produce or not want to produce, want to have access to. So I think that is a real concern. And I think we're right to, advocates for data protection, I think are right to be exploring these things and being careful about it. I think it's incredibly important for people to educate themselves about what's happening to their data. Whether it's your medical data, or your school data, or whatever it is. When it comes to, you were talking about environmentalism, and I assume you're sort of referring to these huge data centers, right, that are being built. And interestingly, from the engineering perspective, right, this is going to be a key problem that engineers are going to have to solve. So it's the power that these things require. I mean, the power grids that we have right now were not built for the power sinks that these data centers are creating. They weren't. And so electrical engineers are sort of getting lifted up to say, because that's where power and it's funny because for a long time everybody thought power engineering was boring. So like nobody wanted to go into power engineering. Why would you study transmission lines? Well, now it's a hot topic to understand what to do with the grid. And so from an engineering perspective, we've got some really serious issues that we need to try to solve. And it ties into environmentalism because whatever we can do to make those data centers less of a sink, then the better that we can do with the environment. You had a third thing. What was it? It was
Job displacement and
job
and
displacement.
replacement.
Job displacement. Okay. And again, I go back to robotics as an example because there were certainly, with the advent of robots, especially in industry, there were certainly jobs that were displaced. You go to a big manufacturing line for Volvo or, Ford or whoever, and you don't see humans welding the bodies together, right? You've got robots. And you could argue that was technically that was a great place to put a robot. Robots do that stuff really, really well. They do big, hot, heavy stuff. And in some cases, they do very, very precise stuff. And so, yes, there have been jobs displaced. The hope, of course, for every society is that whatever you're displacing, that industry now there are new jobs that are created, you hope, because of what that industry can do. And it was harder to track that when it came to robotics. It was really kind of hard to track. With AI, there's an interesting phenomenon, and again, experienced through our son. And that is the creation of jobs around training the AIs. So our son was looking for a fully remote job because he wants to move around the world. And there are these companies now, you may have heard of them, Mercor, Micro One, or a couple of these companies, and they will pay humans to do tasks that will improve somebody's AI. So one of the companies comes to these AI training companies and says, we need to know something about perhaps how fast it would take a human to do a certain task, because we want to make sure that we can get our AI to do that task faster. And so they would pay humans by the hour. So you come in and you're vetted to have a certain expertise. Maybe it's in copy editing, maybe it's in design, maybe it's in language. And they give you specific tasks. They're just like 1 or 2 hours long. And you complete that task, and then that information goes off to whoever the client is, whichever AI company it is, and they use that to improve their AI. Those jobs did not exist before. And they're only there because the AI is there. So it's part of the gig economy. You get in and they're very well paid. In some cases, it's like $150 an hour because you know something that AI company wants to know. And these middlemen companies sort of liaise this. So in the case of AI, it's easier to see jobs being created that are, they talk about entry-level jobs being eliminated by AI. But in a way, this is more of a direct replacement because it's around whatever you know. So whatever you already know, the AI companies want to know. So it's just really interesting. And he has gotten into a couple of these and experienced them. So will there be
It's like
jobs
lab.
displaced? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's like testing of rats,
Yeah.
but literally just in the human form. It's like basically
Kind of.
there's human like AI bit and the masters above going, let's test it on the human
Yes.
rats. So let's
Yes.
test it on the humans first, and then let's basically just make sure it's safe for us. And then it's absolutely bizarre. What a crazy world! I think.
Yeah.
My opinion is the reason why sustainability has become such a big issue and then linked to AI is because of the job displacement fear.
Uh-huh.
Let's be honest, we haven't really cared about sustainability for such a long period of time. It hasn't stopped us eating fish. It hasn't stopped us mass producing plastic, and it hasn't done all of the different things that it's done. Because ultimately it's like, well, it don't really affect me. It's like, yeah, but it could affect your children. Yeah, I don't really care about it. Now it's affecting you now. Right now I'm going to care. Or literally, you can't do that. It's like, well, do you? I think that's the biggest thing that I see personally. It's affecting lives and the people are living it right now rather than future generations. Is why it's become such a polarizing conversation. The lab testing thing is really interesting because ultimately, what's strange is I was speaking to and talking about job coaches and careers advisors, and that's a question for higher education. I suppose as a dean, as a parent, how do we prepare students and young people for the adjustment of these jobs that life is always been ambiguous, but is even more ever changing? And if you think about, I always get this wrong, but I guess, are we Gen Z now? I don't know, whatever. But ultimately, I don't even know what we are. But the generation now will have 17 jobs. I think the research of 17 jobs, 5 careers, and 3 side hustles. That was maybe 2022, 2023, 2024. What does that even look like now? How do you even prepare for a world that is ever changing but rapidly evolving? How do we do that with linear programs such as engineering, where they generally come in, they're taught something that becomes outdated by the time they've actually got their qualification? And is it the wraparound and the value add that we give these young people to prepare them for the world, not just an employment and a role and a job?
And it's that critical thinking piece, right? It's the whatever it is you're doing linearly. Hopefully there's lots of these iterations or cycles along the way that you're saying, as you're doing this, I want you to think about it, think about it, think about it, think about it, think about it. Is what you're doing, does it make sense? How does it relate to the outside world, right? How do you apply what you just learned in the world of that moment? Rather than how was it applied, 10 years ago? How is it in this moment? And I do think young people have an extra layer of challenge because of exactly what you just said. It's always been true in engineering. As you say, at the end of 4 years, a lot of things that you learned might have been obsolete, but now it might be obsolete tomorrow. And I think the more that we teach students about the philosophy of what's happening, the social impact of what's happening. And at a small, so Manhattan is a liberal arts school with a big engineering school in the middle of it. It's easier for us in our programming because students are required to take, even if they're engineers, they're required to take some liberal arts classes and so on. When you go to a big school like Penn State, they can go through their entire curriculum with a very small taste only of things outside engineering. And so it's those students that I worry about the most because they're not in an environment where the university is talking about things like respect for persons and is talking about integrity and talking about accountability. In a small school, and Manhattan happens to be a Lasallian Catholic school, so there's this whole set of values that are inculcated into the students all the time. It's harder in a really big university where that is not part of the overall culture. But it's the critical thinking. It's thinking about, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I learning what I'm learning? Is it okay? Because if it's not okay, then I need to do something else. And it's a challenge that, we're all trying to deal with. I'm a boomer, so, I don't know what generation we're in, but I think we're beyond Gen Z. We Gen Alpha now?
Yeah, we're in Gen Alpha. We're in Gen Alpha now.
We're Gen Alpha now. So my son is a Gen Zers. Both of my sons are Gen Zers. And they're struggling.
I don't even know what I am.
You're a boomer, Steve.
Am I a boomer?
The way that you're asking that makes you a boomer.
Is it a boomer?
You're a millennial. You're a millennial, I think.
I thought millennials were 2000 beyond.
No.
Why is it called millennial then?
Why is it called anything?
Well, I'm going in a rabbit hole.
We're almost like Gen Y. We're in between Gen X and Gen Z. We're in that space, me and you, in our early 40s.
What's a boomer then, Kathryn? What are you in?
Don't even ask.
Don't
go
there.
Age. I'm not asking age. I'm asking what makes you a boomer, because that sounds better than X. Well, I don't want to be Gen X or something else. That sounds shit. Why is yours better than mine, Kathryn? I want to be a boomer. How can I be born earlier?
It does. It is kind of a cool name, but then the cool thing about XYZ is nobody can remember how old you are. With boomers, it's like, oh, we know,
And we've done that thing where we've gone XYZ, and when we go, what do we call next? I don't know. We've run out of letters in the alphabet. Where do we go next? It's interesting.
I think they did go to alpha. Right, it's like
so starting again.
They're starting again. So but now we're starting Greek. Now
are we going beta? How on earth did we even get onto this? This is my fault. I apologize, but
it's all good. It's all good. This is so much fun.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I think we were talking about the challenges of teaching young people how to think through this, and I think we need to think about their mental well-being a lot, because I think they're having to make decisions so fast, and that's going to make some people really anxious. So I do believe that we need, as educators, to be making sure that those kinds of resources are there, because young people we've always had to be concerned about their well-being, but now I think the pressures are they've never been higher. And so I think that's super important.
I agree. And I think the fact that we've got people that are thinking at this space, and the fact that we're in a conversation around how do we work with it rather than against it? How do we make sure that this isn't just a case of, well, only those people who have got access to that money, that have got access to that large language model, will get ahead, and then everybody else gets forgotten about. And I love the fact that this is an engineering challenge, because it genuinely is. It's not just about, and it's all levels of engineering. And I love the fact that you talked about how this is now meaning that power engineers have got to get involved, and interestingly, it's brought in electrical engineers and structural engineers are going to get developed into this as well, and then nuclear engineer. There's all sorts of things that's going to happen here, and we've been very fortunate for the last couple of years to be doing some partnership work with Engineering UK on the podcast, and
Great.
That particularly how we ensure that underrepresented groups are represented in that space as well. And in fact, in an AI space where there's a huge bias in certain ways, making sure that there's that level of inclusion and representation is super important. So thank you for for bringing and doing the work that you're doing. We always finish our EduFuturist podcast with 3 quick fire questions. Now, you may well have been prompted by this, and if not, but you are well all over being able to go then and deal with the rabbit holes. There's no panic when any kind of questions come your way, or 3, 5 questions all at once. The way that we do quick fire questions is I'll do one, Steve will do one, and I'll finish with it. And they are what they're supposed to be on the tin. We try really, really hard. We always fail to do it as quick fire. But yeah, just your thoughts on this. So the first one is this, and I know that you work in higher ed, but I'm sure that you'll be able to help us with this one. So if schools were judged like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what do you think would change overnight?
If schools are like restaurants, I think schools that, well, students are going to go to the ones they like the most. They're going to go to the ones where the food, the outcome, the food is what they enjoy the most. I think the smaller schools would have an advantage because it's easier for them to change the menu. The big schools takes longer to change the menu. So if somebody doesn't like something, it's going to be, they're going to lose business to the small boutique restaurant schools. That's what I think.
Okay. What is the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
Oh, gosh, the most dangerous myth that we know everything about our students, because we don't. Because we don't understand enough about humans. And so we tell ourselves that we know better, and that we don't listen to them to find out from them, because they know themselves better than we do.
Keep it in, Meg, keep it in. If a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
I would say because it's important. It's important to be in an environment where other people are learning with you. And you could do that at home a little bit, but your family doesn't know everything that all of those other kids know. And so being there where you're around other kids and you're seeing how other people learn and the questions they have, that's super important, because that's what's going to happen in life. You're not going to live in a vacuum.
Well, do you know, when you have these quick fire questions, both me and Steve are sat here going, we want to pick it up. And at some point, I reckon what we're going to need to do is do a podcast where we talk about what other people have said about these quick fire questions, and actually go into town and go deep on them, because they were brilliant. The fact that we're looking at how different people learn, the ideas around the small restaurants will do better than bigger restaurants. That was cool. I know Steve did really well then, not during the conversation, but it's been a wonderful exploration, not just about the AI research that you've been doing, but also the fact of somebody who has been working in this space for a significant amount of time, and what you've seen and how you've supported that and supported learners at different levels, and yet still have this passion and vigor to keep changing it and keep being aware of where it is, as well as the fact of understanding and exploring how AI can be a force for good, as opposed to something that is changing things irrevocably in a negative way. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it. We'll link in the show notes to some of the work that Kathryn has been doing, and as always, please do let us know what you think in the comments, and let us know any of your questions that you might want to ask to Kathryn. Connect with her, find out about what she's doing. And Kathryn, it's been wonderful to have you on the EduFuturist podcast today.
Thank you so much. I did promise a quiz, so Steve, you have to say my last name.
Kathryn Jablokow.
Perfect. See,
yes,
you passed 100%.
See, there you go. 100%.
A plus. Well done.
Grade 9. Good man.
I've been practicing. I don't know if everybody's seen it. If you watch back, everybody, the last 10 minutes, I've just been repeating it, just going through it. But it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been, it's been wonderful. It's been great.
Same.
So
thank you so much for having me
rabbit
on.
holes.
Amazing.
Thanks, Kathryn.
Thank you.
pictures